I'm going to show you this. So yes, tonight we are joined by Tim Lescher for our Wildlife Wednesday with Alaska Wildlife Alliance. And this is the Kenai Peninsula chapter, but there are 3 chapters which consist of Anchorage, Kenai, and Juneau. And this is just some virtual engagement guidelines are that to please turn off your camera and your speaker so that we can focus on our guest speaker tonight and make the image clear and the sound clear as well. If you have a question, please put it in the chat and I will field them at the end for Tim. And most important thing is to sit back, relax, and enjoy and learn something new. So again, thank you so much to our members for making this a free event. Because of this, we are able to have speakers like Tim come and join us and have our members learn something new. Okay, so we have 3 pillars with AWA that are very important to us. These being citizen science, education, and advocacy. So speaking about our citizen science, we like to get our citizens involved with the endangered Cook Inlet beluga. So look out for our season, which is starting soon. If you're in the peninsula, near the Kenai and Kasilof, AWA would love for you to get involved with AKBMP and help out with some monitoring sessions. We've also partnered with the electric bus system in Juneau to highlight and advocate for our bear aware signs and posters. And we do education work like tabling, and you can see us tabling a lot in the summer months, and we do a lot of events like this. Okay. So then, some more about our advocacy is that we requested trap setbacks in the Matsu. We did this back in January, and I have updates on that in just a moment. And this fall, we've joined a lawsuit to protect the Beaufort Sea polar bears as well. And we are in several lawsuits, which you can see on our website, and that will be available in the chat as well. And now for some more latest news. We're working to protect the belugas, and we're part of an advocacy group focusing to get better protection for the beluga whales. Our vice president for our board, Dr. John Morton, has been published online, and there's some snippets below that you can see. And we have submitted our proposal to the board in January, asking for 50-yard setbacks on trails. And I have an update on that in just a moment. So some upcoming events. So we have our Wildlife Wednesday. The Kenai Chapter, which is what you're viewing tonight, is available every 3rd Wednesday of the month, and April will be our last month doing so. And each chapter has its own Wednesday. If you are interested, we have our climate adaptation workshop next week. If you want to learn forward-thinking approaches on climate change and wildlife, please join. It is free, again. You just need to pre-register, but the link is found on the website. And again, that link will be posted in the chat for you to look at. So talking about Proposal 199, you might have heard about it earlier this winter. This has moved forward from South Central meeting to a state meeting, and this is great news. If you've not commented yet, or if you know others who would like to be involved, or to share your thoughts or opinions on trap setbacks for multi-use trails in the Matsu, you have from now until this Friday the 18th to put your thoughts, comments, etc. On the proposal, which will, again, that link will be put in the chat for you to take a look if you would like. Our Wildlife Wednesdays, these are being recorded and they're put on our website as well as our YouTube channel. And then another thing to look for is our wildlife walks, which keep a lookout for those soon. Those will be starting back up. Those are very cool. We also have our wildlife calendars for sale, and those are also super awesome and have some beautiful images. So please purchase one of those from our website. And then another interesting tidbit of information is the blue market in Anchorage, and 1% of their proceeds from January through March go towards AWA. So if you were in the Anchorage area, please take a look at that store, and it's all about sustainability and things like that. Yes. So thank you again for our members. Wildlife Wednesdays are free, thanks to you all. If you would like to become a member, there is a link, and it is $35 a year, which is like buying a $3 cup of coffee a month. So it's a really awesome deal. And if you wish to support in other ways, here are some images at the bottom which you can look at, and those are other ways to support us. And if you want to volunteer, please reach out. We would absolutely love that. So now I'm going to hand it off to Tim to present on his topic. Let me just skip that.
All right. Thank you, Julia and Kelsey. Go ahead and load up here. All right. Again, my name is Tim Lescher, and my presentation tonight is supernatural history. Sorry, a little bit of issue there. So first off, I just wanted to start with a few acknowledgements. I'd like to acknowledge that we are on Dena'ina land and to pay my respects to elders, both past and present. The indigenous oral histories, stories, and beliefs about wolves I gathered from public sources, primarily the first domestication, and I've tried to relay them as accurately and respectfully as possible. So I'll jump right in with the natural history. And I really should have named this a brief natural history. Wolves are one of the most intensely studied animals in history for terrestrial animals. And as a result, you could do an entire university course on them. So it's going to be a brief natural history, also going to be a brief supernatural history as well. At some point during the Miocene, the first animals of the genus Canis evolved. They were small. A general progression towards larger canids would occur. And Canis lepophagus was a small species and is believed to have given rise to the modern canids in the New World. So essentially what happened is wolves' ancestors evolved in the New World, migrated over Beringia into Eurasia, and then in Eurasia, they evolved into modern day wolves and migrated back over to reinvade the New World. Probably around 130,000 to 190,000 years ago, and possibly even more than that, as much as 300,000 years is possible. Really depends on what publication you're reading. The long and the short of it is they've been here for a very long time, and that predates the arrival of humans in North America by at least 100,000 years, and most likely hundreds of thousands of years. So how many species of wolves are alive today? The biggest picture right here is the gray wolf, the species that we have here in Alaska. It's the most common species worldwide. We also have in North America the red wolf, which is the top right, and that is its own species. It's Canis rufus, being Canis lupus, currently recognized as its own species. There are camps that say it should be a subspecies, but it's currently recognized differently, and it's critically endangered. The middle one is the African wolf, Canis lupister, and that's another recent, with the advent of genetic studies, some of these species that were previously lumped together are now being split, and vice versa, depending on what taxa you're speaking of. I'm not a taxonomist. I don't have the knowledge or the patience for it really, but I definitely like reading about it. The bottom right is the maned wolf, which is not actually a true wolf. But you will see them called wolves, and they're a species in South America that actually belongs to a different genus. It's not even in the genus Canis. So a wolf is kept fed by its feet. This is an old Russian proverb. I learned about it through L. David Meach's book, The Wolf. And it basically means what it sounds like. The legs of a wolf are its moneymaker. And of course, the jaws come into play, the nose comes into play, the senses. But generally speaking, what gets the wolf to its food and allows it to chase down its food are its legs. So I'm going to talk a little bit about movement. Wolves are renowned movers. In a recent analysis, wolves moved further total annual distance than any terrestrial species on Earth. So they did a study and looked at not just predators, but also their prey on multiple continents, and then compared them. Caribou were actually the longest linear migrators, but when they looked at overall movement, that is complete movement back and forth, wolves actually moved further than any other species. Up to 35 miles overnight has been documented, and 45 miles in a 24-hour period as well has been documented. So I say has been documented. This just kind of, perhaps for some of you goes without saying, but you can only put so many satellite collars on so many wolves, or back before radio telemetry was going on. You could only have so many aerial, planes following wolves. So this is really just a subsample. So we don't even know what wolves might be doing when the collar's on them. It's a small subsample. So what I'm getting at is they possibly could even do much more than what this is documented as. So along with movement, I'd like to talk briefly about dispersal. It's something that all wolves undergo at certain points in their life, usually about 1 to 2 years old. So it's something that young wolves undergo. It's essentially leaving their natal pack to either go join up with another pack or start their own. So mating is the bottom line that probably drives this. And it's a very trying time for wolves and potentially dangerous time as well. In fact, the most likely outcome is death. Many of you may have heard about this famous wolf that was in the news lately, Wolf OR93, actually originated in Oregon, just southeast of Mount Hood. So those of you who are familiar with Oregon, Mount Hood's pretty far up there in the state. So this wolf left its natal pack and began dispersing, moved through the entire state of Oregon, south, and then entered into California. Just kept on going south, breaking records really as it went. It went through a total of at least 18 counties and over 935 miles. That's a minimum distance that it moved. So again, not including some of the back and forth that it probably did, and after its collar stopped transmitting, what it did after that. And it was the last wolf documented that far south in 100 years. Also, the first wolf entering into the Yosemite National Park area in over 100 years, or just outside of the park. Also, our wolves up here are not to be outdone, renowned movers as well. This is courtesy of Dave Stallfeld from Alaska Department of Fish and Game. And Dave recently tagged 4 wolves, 3 male subadults and 1 adult female. And as you can see from this graphic, this particular wolf moved quite a great distance. This is the female. And she went all the way from the Kenai Peninsula all the way up into the Brooks Range before being harvested in the Brooks Range. And that was basically from Kenai to where she wound up over 700 miles. So again, this doesn't include, you see down there south in the Kenai Peninsula, doesn't include all those back and forth movements, and up in the Brooks Range, the back and forth movements up there. So that's a pretty impressive journey. Another male I should mention that Dave tagged wound up just outside of Denali National Park. So these guys definitely are movers. and can travel quite large distances. So moving on into predator-prey interactions, I've just put a few of the prey species up here, and I'm sure Alaskans tuning in are going to recognize many of these. I'm focusing mostly on North American species, in particular Alaskan species, but wolves do hunt a wide variety of prey globally. So the smallest would be the stick black-tailed deer, which is over on the far right in the middle. We also have caribou in the far bottom right. Dall sheep, mountain goats may also be taken, and elk, which were introduced into Alaska, are in the bottom center. And then they even feed on muskox, moose, and animals as large as bison. So to give you an idea of how big some of these prey are, the moose, a big moose could weigh 1,500 pounds, maybe 1,600 pounds for a really big bull. And then a bison could go over 2,000 pounds. So the fact that wolves, which usually weigh around 100 pounds or so, sometimes less, sometimes more, can take down these animals is pretty remarkable. Their summer diet, I should mention that's primarily during the winter is when they're really going to be able to capitalize on those ungulates. The summer diet, they still eat ungulates, but it's a much more varied diet. It's more diverse. They can take beavers, hares, juvenile ungulates, and in some areas like Alaska and British Columbia, they even eat a fair amount of marine animals, including fish, and even seals may be taken. Vegetation, grasses, and blueberries can be taken. I've been fortunate enough to see my dog, eating blueberries in the wild. And she kind of rakes them, plucks them off of the bushes. And I have to imagine that's similar to how wolves would be foraging for blueberries in the wild. There is a study from, I believe it was northern Minnesota, where in the summer, a wolf pack actually like 80% of its, around 80% of its summer diet was blueberries. So this can make up a significant portion of some wolf packs' diets. Of course, they are going to opportunistically go after things besides that. Particularly juvenile ungulates in the summertime can't be taken. Just like to share this quote. I was fortunate enough to get to pick Dr. Vic Van Ballenberg's brain, and he said wolves eat much more vegetation than one would think. And so that's somebody who's got decades of experience up here in Alaska with working with not only wolves, but moose as well. So the hunt. Wolves can reach as much as 38 miles per hour over short distances when they're chasing down their prey. Basically, the hunt can be divided into multiple steps. One of the ways that it's divided by Meach and Boitani in their behavior, ecology, and conservation of wolves is first they have to locate the prey. So wolves obviously are going to use their senses when doing this, their nose, their ears, but they also go to the tops of ridge tops and they'll use their sight to look down in the valleys to see if they can see any prey that way as well. When they do locate prey, you get what's called the stalking portion of the hunt. So at this point, the wolves are going to try to close the distance between the prey and themselves without alerting the prey to their presence. Then you move on into what's known as the encounter. And this is more or less face-to-face. Many of you have probably seen this, or some of you may be even fortunate enough to see it in the wild, but perhaps on Nat Geo. And you see the predator staring at the prey, you see the prey staring back at the predator, and essentially the ball is now in the court of the prey. And during the encounter, the wolves actually, it's counterintuitive, they want to get the prey running. So the prey can do three things. They can run, they can stand their ground, or they may even approach the pack of wolves. Say it's not a very large pack of wolves and it might be a big bull moose. It might walk towards the wolves, essentially demonstrate, I'm not an easy prey animal. You want to keep moving on, look for something that's easier pickings. When the wolves do close that distance and perhaps the prey gets moving, you have what's called the rush. So then the wolves do close in, they move in on the animal, and you proceed into what's known as the chase, and they begin chasing down that animal or attempting to chase down that animal. They usually will go for the flanks, the rump. The nose is also a good grabbing point, particularly on moose and some other ungulates. So they're going to go after those parts of the animal when trying to take down a prey animal. A little bit about reproduction. Wolves begin breeding in late winter and they pair off, and then the breeding pair, usually you can notice because at that time of year they'll begin sleeping near one another, often within a meter or so. There's usually only one breeding pair per pack, but as with most things in nature, there are exceptions to everything, particularly in very large and well-fed packs. Male and females mate and form a tie afterwards, which may last for quite some time. And you essentially get the male and female rump to rump facing away from one another. The pups are usually born in May, sometimes late April, and further south, sometimes sometimes in April further south, and sometimes in June further north. So this does change latitude-wise. And an average litter size is 7 pups. Denning, wolves can use a den site year after year. Sometimes they dig and widen out fox dens and overtake fox dens. Wolves can be quite, or wolf dens, can be quite expansive underground. And there are some wolf researchers that actually get down in the dens, crawl around with a flashlight, or have made diagrams, very detailed diagrams with measurements. And Gordon Haber was one of these. And his and Mary Beth Holloman's book, Among Wolves, has some fascinating diagrams of their, I don't know how long he spent getting these measurements, but wolf researchers essentially are a different breed. Wolves may exhibit communal raising of the young. And so this is an important point, because this behavior actually requires a fair or a good degree of intelligence. And often a lot of focus, and you already saw me focusing on this, is on the hunting behavior of wolves. But something that oftentimes gets overlooked is just how intelligent these animals are. So when the pups are a little bit bigger and able to move, they'll actually leave the den site and go to what's known as rendezvous sites. And these are typically above ground sites with sometimes interconnecting trails from one rendezvous site to another. And similar to the den sites, these can be used by wolf packs year after year. Later in the fall, the pack is able to become more mobile, in fact, nomadic in a sense, and these younger wolves are almost indistinguishable from the adult wolves. So they're large, they're definitely mobile, but they're still not good hunters yet. That skill they're going to be learning socially from the more experienced adult wolves. And usually it's the breeding pair that lead the pack, or the more experienced adults that are leading the pack during this time of year. So now I'm going to move on a little bit and shift gears into the supernatural history of wolves. So for hundreds, if not thousands of years, people have looked to wolves for inspiration. Humans have respected, even emulated the wolf. And the hunting prowess of wolves was highly regarded. So of course I have to talk about the direwolf, which recently made headlines in HBO's Game of Thrones. There's definitely some creative liberties that were taken with the depiction of direwolves in the series. They weren't as big as depicted. I think some of the scenes, the animals looked about 300 or 400 pounds. They were larger and more sturdy and heavily built than the gray wolves, but they weren't as fleet of foot, and generally a little bit larger than gray wolves, but not to the extent that they're depicted by HBO. They have extremely strong bone crunching jaws. So this is a direwolf replica skull here in the lower photo, and you can see those really strong carnassials on it that are specialized for cracking bones. Gray wolves also are capable of cracking bones, but the direwolf definitely much more of an animal that was geared towards hunting larger megafauna like the steppe bison, perhaps even woolly mammoths, and some of the other big megafauna that existed during the Ice Age. Recent studies have actually indicated that the direwolf was perhaps not even a canid or not a member of Canis. And so a different genus has been proposed. Again, the taxonomists are going to probably debate that for a while before they land on one, and then they may change their decision a few years later. And this is interesting because Curtin, who is an Ice Age specialist, actually kind of proposed this idea way back in 1980 when he and Anderson published their landmark Pleistocene Mammals of North America. Either way, the direwolf went extinct around 9,000 years ago, possibly due to loss of Ice Age megafauna, as I mentioned. But as I mentioned, it was also shorter legged, and so it wasn't as fleet of foot as the gray wolf. So perhaps it just couldn't have caught up with the ungulates that were still extant after the other megafauna went extinct. Another thing to mention is their brain capacity was not as big, and their brain to body ratio was not as large as in the gray wolf. So that could have factored into the extinction as well. Werewolves. Of course, I have to talk about this. I'm actually a Universal monster, old school monster fan. And so here in the right is Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman. As early as 1800 BC in the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the earliest known pieces of literature, there is a possible reference to werewolves. So Gilgamesh refuses a woman because she's rumored to have turned a man into a wolf. And so the idea of werewolves or similar type of beings has been around for a very long time. Some indigenous people wore wolf skin because they thought it brought supernatural union between the human and the wolf. The Tanana people believed wolves were once men, and Native American Plains tribes thought wolves spoke to people. There were no cases known to science of a human being raised by wolves thus far. Just throwing that out there because, again, relatively recently in the news, there was a woman who claimed to have been raised by the wolves or lived with the wolves for a very long period of time. And that was subsequently exposed as a farce. And she pretty much fabricated the entire story. Wolf attacks. So wolf attacks do occur. They are rare, but they definitely have been documented. They are particularly rare in North America. And even more rare is a wolf attack resulting in human mortality. So only 2 people have been documented to have been killed by wolves in the past 50 years in southwestern Alaska and in Saskatchewan. Now wolf attacks in Europe are becoming increasingly rare, but this wasn't always the case, especially back in the Middle Ages and prior to and after the Middle Ages. There are a variety of records of wolf attacks resulting in human mortality. Could be a number of reasons for why this has shifted and we don't have these attacks anymore. Definitely many fewer wolves in Europe than back in those centuries. And also the advent of firearms likely factored into this as well. But human behavior has changed too, and humans don't employ or use children as shepherds like they used to back in those days. And wolves are smart animals, so they have learned in many places that humans can be a threat and are a potential threat. And many times they prefer to just avoid us as best as they can. Do wolves kill for sport or surplus killing? So surplus killing can occur and does occur, but similar to the killing of humans by a wolf, it is rare. It essentially requires 2 conditions or a variety of conditions to occur at the same time. late spring and deep snow can result in surplus killing by wolves. And also on caribou calving grounds, this has been documented as well. But I want to underscore the rarity of it. In fact, L. David Meach, in 30 years of wolf research, has observed that, or did observe this on 2 occasions, what he considered and documented as surplus killing. Again, I should define that. Killing animals and not consuming the entire animal, or just leaving the dead animal altogether. That would be the definition of surplus killing. And then in 40 years of research, Rolf Peterson observed surplus killing in only 3 of 40 winters. So that gives you a general idea of just how rare these occurrences are. But again, they do occur and have been documented in nature. The wolves of Isle Royale, again, this is L. David Peterson's work. In fact, his dissertation was on the wolves of Isle Royale. And again, I just kind of wanted to throw these statistics out here. He spent 3 winters gathering this data and doing plane flights over Isle Royale. Wolves that he observed detected 131 moose. 77 moose were tested by wolves. That is, the wolves made an effort, an attempt to see if they could catch and kill these moose. And 6 of those 77 wolves that were tested resulted in killings, successful hunts. So that's a 7.8% hunting efficiency. And that again just kind of shows you just how much effort and how much caloric output it is for these animals to make a successful kill. Do wolves howl at the moon? It's a similar answer. Yes, they do, but they also howl when there's no moon. They howl during daytime. They howl for a variety of reasons. In the wild, one of the reasons would be locating another member of their pack. They also howl for what's known as pack spacing, essentially advertising to another pack of your location and where you are. Wolves do kill other wolves in the wild, and there is a risk of wolf-wolf conflict. And in fact, in some studies, the #1 cause of death of wolves was being killed by other wolves. So that's something that goes on in the wild and is not necessarily a rare thing. So to advertise and let another pack know where you are kind of can mitigate and lessen the risk of that conflict. Also, finding a mate, wolves may howl for that reason. And then strengthening social bonds within the pack. So when I've observed wolves howling, the one thing that strikes me is that they seem to enjoy it. And so I also think that the wolves just howl because they enjoy it. This perhaps maybe doesn't fit under supernatural. So I'll say, some of this I would classify as metaphysical, and it definitely has a historical context and documented in the oral histories of indigenous people and wolves. The Shoshonean tradition speaks of the wolf as a benign creator. The Comanche people also see the wolf as a creator. In fact, go as far as seeing the dog as the wolf's brother, and they did not eat dog, whereas they were fine with eating horses. And the Tlingit people of the Pacific Northwest, the raven is the creator, but the wolf is another very important animal to the Tlingits. The Cheyenne people actually divided their history into 4 parts. So they have one of them being the time of the dog. And it's now believed by many researchers that, and also by elders of the tribes, have said that that's a misinterpretation. It should be the time of the wolf. Essentially, the Cheyenne wolves were very much like wolves, if not indistinguishable from wolves. So this is very early on in the domestication process in all likelihood. And so they even believed that they could, some of them could understand the wolf language. So what does that mean? Well, interpreting the howls of wolves and using this information to inform their tribe of events to come. And they learned this language from living with the wolves. They believed that if they were hungry or lost, the wolves would help them. And this particular thing is also, our idea is also characteristic of other tribes as well, that the wolf is frequently seen as a guide. These skulls on the left, I'd also like to point out, the top one is a wolf skull, and these are actually Shoshonean, a Shoshonean dog skull is the middle one, and then the bottom one is a domestic dog. The top two, you can see how similar they are, and the Shoshoneans, similar to the Cheyenne, their dogs were very wolf-like. In fact, Europeans that first saw them thought, oh, they have just wolves as pack animals, and that's essentially what many researchers believe they were. Obviously, no genetic testing around way back then when Europeans first showed up. The Blackfeet Nation also had a very strong affinity and have a very strong affinity for wolves. They're native to the traditional historical territory of the Blackfeet people. Wolves coexisted with the Blackfeet people throughout history, and most of the stories are of cooperation between humans and wolves. The Blackfeet people, similar to the previously mentioned tribes, learned from wolves, and they even learned specific hunting techniques like cutting out a single bison from the herd, running it up a hill or running it off a cliff in order to exhaust it and make a kill. This also, the wolf was very important to the indigenous peoples of Alaska and the far north. The Koyukon people of central Alaska see wolves as intelligent, strong, and skilled. They believe they learned hunting skills from wolves long ago. And a wolf person once lived among them and hunted with them, agreeing that wolves would make kills for the people and help drive game to them. Wolves taught the Tlingit people how to stalk seals, and the wolf is the most important communicator with Tunrock, the spirit of the universe. This photo is from Alaska Native Heritage Center, and it's the wolf dance. And you can see the ceremonial garments being adorned in this photo. A fascinating depiction. And I just want to underline that the common thread that we see through, and I just selected a handful of tribes. There's dozens of others. And again, this is I'm not an anthropologist. I'm not Alaska Native, but I just want to say that you could teach an entire course on this, and the tradition or underlying thread from the few stories that I did pull out is one of respect for the wolf, often treating it as an equal or sometimes even a sacred animal. And this tradition of respect definitely extends to contemporary times. The Nez Perce tribe in Idaho supported the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone National Park. The White Mountain Apache tribe allows Mexican gray wolves to be reintroduced on their lands in the southwestern United States. And the Ojibwe tribe recently expressed concern for how wolves were being hunted in the state of Wisconsin. They, on their own volition, decided not to fulfill their own wolf quotas last year. And they essentially decided this based on the previous hunt and their observation that too many wolves had been taken. So well within their right to have fulfilled their wolf quotas, but just chose not to. And even went as far in 2021 as suing the state of Wisconsin over the wolf hunt. Just want to say one more thing on this particular subject. This quote I thought was a pretty telling quote, so I'd like to read it. The Maingin, the Ojibwe word for wolf, is telling us to put into practice the art of listening. We believe there's a reason why things happen, that listening is part of what's going on with the world, and that, excuse me, to the Anishinaabe, the Maingin are our brothers. The legends and stories tell us as brothers, we walk hand in hand together. What happens to the Maingin happens to humanity. And that's a quote from a representative of the Red Cliff tribe. And I think that last sentence especially is particularly striking. What happens to the Meningan happens to humanity. This is not only my references, but just some further reading, and I'm happy to, if anybody wants me to send them an email with this particular slide, or with my favorite wolf books and some of the scientific articles that I particularly find enjoyable and informative, I'm happy to do that. And a couple acknowledgements. I'd like to thank Dr. Debbie Bogie Tobin of the University of Alaska, Dr. Dave Stallfeld of Alaska Department of Fish and Game, Dr. Rachel Kerford Lescher, Jordan Traverso of California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Tom Seaton of Alaska Department of Fish and Game, and the Alaska Native Heritage Center for inspiration, and obviously the Alaska Wildlife Alliance for having me this evening. And if you all have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Okay, thank you so much, Tim. That was an awesome presentation, and I know I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm sure everyone else did as well. So I will field questions now to you, if that's okay with you. Awesome. So let me read the chat. Okay, so someone asks, can you give us some specific examples of the sort of megafauna the direwolf ate?
There were definitely horses back that time, so I'm sure that they were eating horses. Caribou were around at that time, musk oxen. One thing that's interesting about the direwolf is it hasn't yet been found in Alaska, so it's primarily restricted to the lower 48 as far as where their skulls are being found and where the rest of their fossilized remains are. I think they just recently found one in Siberia, and if I'm not wrong, that's like the first direwolf fossilized remains that they've found over there. But steppe bison, probably, maybe even, I don't know if they could take an adult mammoth, but it's possible. Probably a mammoth calf, though. I would assume a direwolf or a pack of direwolves, if they indeed did live in packs, would make use of that. Camels, modern day camels can and do get killed by modern day wolves. So I would assume back in the ice ages, camels also were getting killed by direwolves. There's probably a variety of other megafauna that I've forgotten to list. Large ground sloths, just a fascinating, ensemble of animals that lived where we live today that are no longer here. And yet we still have the gray wolves. And so that just also speaks to what a great, efficient, and, highly skilled animal they are.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I actually have a question. I was wondering, as like kind of evolution progressed, if like in terms of domestication, was that a popular trend or possible for people to do? I'm not sure if you touched on that or not.
I didn't really, and that as far as was it popular at what time, back during the ice ages, or volumes have been written about when it first occurred and where it first occurred. And then that also gets into what is the definition of domestication. A simple one that I like to use and is, altering an animal for the use of humans. And so I think absolutely you could make a case that those wolves that were living with the early humans in North America, that those were, based on that definition, domestic animals. If they're hunting together, and I don't think it was necessarily, it's a reciprocative relationship is what it sounds like to me. The wolves benefited, or the wolf dogs, and then the humans benefited as well. And you see all the stories talking about learning, And so I think there's been a shift from that to the thinking that domestication is something that humans use, or that we're dominant in. And back then, the wolves were in all likelihood the teachers. Is what that book, The First Domestication, that's one of the points that they make, is just how much wolves have educated our species in all likelihood.
Thank you. Another question is the African wolf different than the Ethiopian wolf?
Oh, that is a great question. And I think I would have to look that up. I believe that the Ethiopian wolf might be a jackal, but yeah, I apologize. Again, background's not taxonomy, but I thought that the Ethiopian wolf was a jackal, and so not currently classified as a wolf.
That's really interesting. Another question is, what is the average lifespan of wolves in the wild, and how does that compare to captivity?
Definitely, they're going to be living longer lives in captivity. I've never done any field work of my own with wolves in the wild, but I've definitely spoken to a lot of field biologists, and I spoke to one who said that a 5 or 6 year old wolf in the wild is considered an old wolf, whereas in captivity you can have wolves living well into their teens and living rich, good lives into their teens. So, but they can live long lives in the wild too, but it has to be kind of a set of fortuitous circumstances, and probably in all likelihood a pretty special wolf that makes it into their teens in the wild. I think that a very famous wolf down in Yellowstone, Wolf 21, I believe, lived into his teens, if I'm not mistaken. Might have been 11, might have been as old as 13. You all can check me on that. Sorry, that's my my little wolf over here. She's 13.
Awesome. So then another person asked, I know this is a tough question due to the protection of the species, but are there opportunities for wolf watching in Alaska? I know in Denali this has become hard. We didn't see any, neither in Elk Summit or near the Arctic Wildlife Refuge last summer.
Yeah, it seems like unfortunately, like that person knows as much as me. I would point him towards Denali National Park as well. And I've been fortunate enough to see one wolf in the wild in Katmai National Park, and kind of true to what we were saying about wolves oftentimes prefer just not to be around humans. It was moving the other direction pretty quickly, just didn't really want anything to do with us. So, and I spent a fair amount of time in the wilderness in Alaska, and I see wolf prints. I've been fortunate enough to hear wolves howling twice. But yeah, I wish I had a better answer for that. There's probably, some unique places that I'm not aware of where wolf viewing is really great.
That sounds cool. And then a second question is, what is the population of the wolves in Alaska right now?
Yeah, good question. And I don't think there's really ever been a very statewide census taken. The Alaska Department of Fish and Game has on their website at any given time 7,000 to 11,000 wolves in the state of Alaska. So that might give you a ballpark idea. I'm almost certain that information is dated, and Dr. Stallfeld could probably answer that question a lot better than me. But I would think that probably less than that. I think that would probably I'm not really basing this other than anecdotal information, but I think that estimate would be slightly high.
Well, you were getting tons of love in the comments. So many people are applauding you, thanking you for your presentation. So I wanted to let you know about that. I have another question, actually. So I went to the Anchorage Zoo in November, and there was gray wolves there, and I was really surprised by their the build, and they looked like they had a shortened spine and were kind of hunchback, and there was no real explanation. And I wondered if you knew, or if like maybe they were not rehabilitating, but had taken in like injured ones or something along those lines. But I didn't know if you knew anything about that.
Those wolves are from the wild. They're getting up there in age, and I no longer work with those wolves anymore. But they're not hybrids or anything like that. They're Canis lupus from Alaska, from the interior of Alaska. And I think the hunched over is they're aging animals. And if you see old dogs when people are walking them, they sometimes have that same build. I know that the people at the Alaska Zoo work hard taking care of those animals. And the reality of zookeeping is your animals, just like pets, they get old, and that's in all likelihood what's going on with the hunching that you saw.
Thank you. I've been wondering about that. So another question is, are Southeast Alaska wolves a separate subspecies, and what's the longest distance that they can swim?
Good question. I believe that I read, and this is there's some fascinating studies on the wolves in southeastern Alaska and in British Columbia, and those wolves oftentimes have a very strong marine component to their diet. And I thought I read 6 or 7 miles has been documented, but again, I would have to look that up. But they're definitely better swimmers than we typically think of them. Moose and caribou are phenomenal swimmers, and oftentimes when wolves are hunting moose and caribou, field biologists find kills that are made near bodies of water, lakes or rivers. And the reason is those ungulates are going towards those bodies of water to try to escape. So those animals are better swimmers, better suited for water. Isle Royale that I talked about earlier, one of the reasons that the moose were doing fine is they could swim across Lake Superior and actually get to the island. Whereas if Lake Superior doesn't freeze, the wolves can't get across to the island. But they are, I believe, better swimmers than we've in the past given them credit for. And I thought that I had read 6 or 7 miles had been documented. But yeah, you can check me on that.
Awesome. Okay. Well, are there any more questions from anyone? If you have other questions, please put them in the chat. There's definitely lots of commentary going on, talking about all kinds of. Well, there's another question above that I missed. Let me go back up. Oh, someone says, I have always wondered why Native Americans would use wolf skins to stalk bison, as if wolves preyed on bison. Wouldn't that spook them?
Yeah, I think I had the same thought when I read about that tactic, but the book that I read said if it's just employed with just a few people, then it doesn't startle the herd as like an upright human. So bison, as I mentioned, can possibly weigh over 2,000 pounds. And so they're in all likelihood not going to be spooked by perhaps just 1 or 2 people employing this tactic. So that's the reason that I gleaned from the literature as to why that. But I got to admit, I had that same thought and question, and you would think that wolves would also have the same effect. But the prey animals also are good at reading the predators too, and so sometimes it seems that they can tell from a predator's body language that they're not interested in them. So perhaps the hunters knew how to move towards those animals so they didn't spook them. That's I wish I had a better answer, and I'm sure that there's some Alaska natives out there that could probably enlighten me.
Well, that's really interesting. Thank you. Well, so I'm not seeing any other questions right now, but if anyone wants to pop in some more last minute ones, I know it's 7:58, so we're getting close to our time. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. So if anyone has any last minute questions, put them in the chat. But if not, thank you again so much, Tim, for sharing your information with us and giving us such an awesome presentation. And thank you to everyone for joining. We are so happy that you got to watch this.
Yeah, thank you very much again for having me, and I'm happy to do it. It was fun.
Yeah, awesome. And like I said, you're getting tons of thank yous in the comments. Everyone is very thankful. Fascinating presentation. So, yeah.
Hard to go wrong with wolves, right?
Exactly. All right. Well, I guess if there's no more questions, we'll leave the meeting there. And yeah, if this recording will be again put on our YouTube channel as well as our website. So if you want to view it again and send it to all your people, please do and utilize that link. And yes, thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night.